I still remember the morning Melissa Crane first showed up at Novasphere Analytics, a company tucked in the heart of Seattle, where the rain felt like a constant heartbeat. She arrived with a high-energy presentation, a deck of blinding slides, and a voice perfectly trained to sound confident enough to impress, fake enough to sell. At the time, the company was deep in a $50 million data compliance contract with the Federal Department of Commerce. I was Elena Brooks, Senior Data Integrity Auditor, responsible for ensuring the system didn't break under pressure. 7 years in that building had taught me one rule: silence was survival. The loud ones never lasted past the next meeting. Melissa came in as the new HR director, but everyone knew she wanted more than that. She talked about redefining company culture, about bringing modern creativity into the workplace. It sounded polished, maybe even inspiring, if you didn't look too close at the control underneath it. I didn't care for office fashion contests or slogans about individuality. My job was to trace data flows, catch coding anomalies, and make sure nothing leaked. Every morning, I showed up in the same uniform: white shirt, gray slacks, hair tied back, laptop in hand, never late. That day's company-wide meeting took place in the 10th floor hall. I sat in the back, laptop open, ready to take notes. Melissa walked on stage with that morning show brightness, her voice dripping confidence as she talked about innovation through appearance. People laughed, nodded, exchanged polite smiles. To them, it was harmless corporate fluff. To me, it sounded like a warning wrapped in charm. When she finished, she called for opinions. Then she called my name. I wasn't sure why. Elena, she said, as the person overseeing compliance, what do you think about updating Novasphere's dress policy to reflect a more digital age mindset? I stood up, felt hundreds of eyes turn toward me, and answered evenly, like reading a report. I think performance should still be what defines us. Creativity is fine, but it shouldn't outshine competence. A few chuckles rippled through the room. Melissa smiled, but her eyes cooled a few degrees. I knew I'd just been marked. After the meeting, I went back to my office on the 6th floor, where the flickering neon light hummed like a tired pulse. On my way, I overheard someone whisper, "The new HR's tough. She's planning to rewrite all the internal rules." I didn't care. I opened my terminal, logged into the audit console, and started scanning through the day's data logs. A small notification blinked in the corner of the screen. HR request to update personal profile. I sighed, opened the form, filled in the basics, then noticed a new field: personal style, free description. I left it blank, hit save, and closed the window. That afternoon, as I was reviewing a heavy data batch for the federal project, Melissa appeared at my door, holding a cup of coffee, eyes sweeping over my spotless desk. "Elena," she said softly, "I'm impressed by your discipline. But don't you think we could make this place a little less sterile? More color? More energy?" I looked up. "I think data needs accuracy, not color." She smiled, set her cup down dangerously close to the edge of my desk. "Sometimes accuracy isn't enough to make people remember you, Elena. Around here, standing out is also a skill." She left behind a trace of vanilla perfume and a chill that stayed at the back of my neck. I wiped the small coffee stain off the table and went back to work, but I knew this wasn't about fashion anymore. The next morning, an email arrived. Small group session, professional style, mandatory attendance. The invite list had 3 names: mine, Melissa's, and Ethan Cole's, Deputy Project Director. Ethan was the same man whose reports I'd quietly corrected at least 10 times. Always cheerful, always saying, "Elena, you're my lifesaver," but never once mentioning my name in his summaries. Something felt off, but I accepted anyway. In my line of work, everything needs documentation. That afternoon, I glanced through the frosted glass of the HR office. Melissa and Ethan were inside, laughing, heads leaning close. The sunlight hit them just right, like a photograph I never wanted to see. I knew they were planning something. I turned off my screen and stepped into the hallway. The sound of coffee machines, keyboards, and laughter, all of it blended into a steady hum. At Novasphere, everyone was busy. Everyone was rushing. and no one noticed when a storm began with a single harmless sentence. Back then, I didn't know it yet, but that morning meeting would change more than the company dress code. It would change my life. Some rules aren't written to protect, they're written to trap. I still remember standing by the 6th-floor window that day, watching the rain-soaked street below. People hurried by with hot coffee cups, jackets fluttering in the wind. Outside, life went on. Inside that building, one pointless regulation, one email, had just set off a chain of events that would make Novasphere pay dearly. If you're still listening, I want to ask, where are you hearing this from? Maybe in your car on the way to work, or late at night when you need to believe that justice sometimes finds its way back. Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And if you like stories of quiet revenge, of justice that doesn't scream, but still hits exactly where it should, hit subscribe. This story's just getting started, and I promise, the next chapter will make you want to hear every last word. The small group meeting on professional style was set for Monday morning at 8:30 in a glass-walled room on the 7th floor. I arrived on time, notebook in hand, a cup of black coffee in the other. Melissa was already there, wearing a pastel blue dress, her hair softly curled, her perfume lighter than last time, but still too sweet for a rainy morning. Ethan Cole showed up right after me, suit perfectly tailored, smile perfectly rehearsed. He was the kind of man who could make a room believe he was trustworthy, at least for the first 3 minutes. Melissa began with her usual tone, friendly enough to blur the line between a meeting and a morning talk show. She talked about building personal image, about how demeanor shaped federal clients' trust, and then smoothly transitioned into how we needed representatives who embodied the spirit of Novasphere. I listened, but my mind was already recording every word, every phrase, out of habit. The kind of reflex you develop when your job is to collect evidence. Ethan, she said, turning toward him, you've always represented the project team so well. I think your professional, modern look sets a great example. Elena could learn a lot from you. Ethan smiled, nodded, then looked at me. I think everyone has their own way of expressing themselves. But sometimes, to show clients they're working with a creative team, you need to let them see that too, don't you think? I answered slowly. Federal clients don't care what color we wear. They just want clean, accurate data. If they wanted fashion, they'd go to New York, not Seattle. The room froze. Melissa kept smiling, but her eyes turned cold. She picked up her pen and wrote something down on the folder in front of her. I knew it was a note, and I knew my name was in it. After the meeting, I walked back to my desk, each step heavy with the weight of what I'd just seen behind her smile. I logged into the internal data management system to review weekend access logs. A new entry appeared at 11:47 p.m. Sunday, Level 2 clearance. I paused. The username read, Ethan Cole. He had no reason to be in the system at that hour. There was no scheduled maintenance, and no one in my department was authorized to work off hours without formal approval. I took a screenshot, saved a copy of the log to an external drive, then wiped the trace of my viewing history. Habit, or maybe instinct, kept me careful. Later that afternoon, as I poured another cup of coffee, Ethan walked into the workspace. He smiled and dropped a mint on my desk. Melissa can be strict, but she just wants things to run smoothly, he said, like he was sharing a small, harmless secret. I know you're not into these formalities, Elena, but sometimes playing along with the system is the only way to survive in it. I looked at the mint, then at him. I don't play along with systems. I write the rules for them. He paused, chuckled awkwardly. You're always that rigid? Always. That's why your data never fails an integrity check. Ethan walked away, still smiling, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. The next day, while combing through additional system logs, I found more of his entries, access times scattered between lunch breaks and late evenings. No one else in the department knew. No one else had the clearance to see what I saw. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing a single misstep could turn into a federal offense. That night, I stayed late. The office was silent except for the rain hitting the glass and the hum of the ventilation. I opened the backup logs and compared them to the previous week's records. A string of unauthorized access led to the encrypted data vault. the one containing federal contract files. Most of the entries were masked and restricted to high-level clearance. I asked myself why a deputy project director would need that kind of access. When I finally shut down the computer, my reflection flickered in the glass. Outside, the rain hadn't stopped. I couldn't tell if I was looking at a storm coming or just imagining one. The next morning, Melissa walked past my desk. She stopped for a moment, looked around, then smiled. I like how tidy your workspace always is, Elena. So traditional. But don't you think tradition needs a little refresh now and then? I replied evenly. Data doesn't go out of style when it's accurate. She tilted her head. Sometimes accuracy isn't what people need. They just need something they can believe, even if it isn't true. Then she walked away. I watched her go, realizing I'd just heard a confession wrapped in sugar. That night, I came home late. On my desk was the external drive with the copied logs. I plugged it into my personal computer, encrypted it again, and locked it in a drawer. I didn't yet know what was happening, but my gut told me I'd stepped into a place I couldn't back out of. In a company where power wears suits and smiles, truth is a rare commodity, and I had just touched it. Monday morning began with the sound of rain tapping against the glass, and an email that landed in every employee's inbox at 7:02 a.m. The subject line glowed in bold confidence. Creative style program. Let's express ourselves with Novasphere. Send it. Melissa Crane, Director of Human Resources. I read it once. The tone was the kind HR departments loved. Sweet, encouraging, and quietly authoritarian. Every employee was invited to adjust their dress style to match the company's spirit of creativity and avoid overly conservative or traditional looks. The final line read, "A few examples of modern styles will be presented at this Wednesday's meeting. Show your personality." I didn't need a second read to understand. That last line wasn't an invitation. It was a warning. By the time I arrived at the office, the floor was buzzing. Everyone was talking about the email. Half amused, half curious. Some joked it was another PR stunt. Others laughed about a possible corporate fashion show. But a few glances darted toward me. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew who that email was really about. At noon, while I was making coffee, Brenda, a young admin, stopped by. "Elena," she whispered, "I heard HR is planning to introduce some kind of reward and penalty system based on employee image. They say it's to encourage creativity, but people think someone's about to be made an example." I smiled faintly. Rumors at Novasphere are always half true. The problem is figuring out which half. That afternoon, Melissa sent me a private message. Only 2 sentences. "Elena, I noticed you've kept your old style. I think we should talk more about cultural alignment. Meet me at 4. The HR office always smelled faintly of vanilla. The lights were brighter than necessary, and soft instrumental music played in the corner." Melissa sat behind her desk, laptop open, expression somewhere between friendly and evaluative. "Elena," she began, "you're one of our most experienced employees, and I truly respect that. But sometimes people who've been around a long time resist change. We're trying to build a youthful, dynamic image. You understand, right?" "I understand that results still matter most," I said. "Of course," she replied smoothly, "but clients also care about perception. I've received some feedback that your style feels a bit closed off, maybe a little distant. We'd like everyone to seem more approachable." "I don't work with clients," I said evenly. "I work with data. Data doesn't need to be approachable." She smiled, though it never reached her eyes. "Sometimes, Elena, it's not about the work. It's about attitude. Some people find you a little rigid, a bit detached. Detached doesn't mean uncooperative," I said. "I do my job. We all know you do it well," she cut in. "But culture is a soft skill. Sometimes it matters more than performance. I just want to help you adapt." I nodded slightly. Noted. The meeting ended with a smile and a handshake. That felt colder than the rain outside. As I left the room, I could feel her gaze follow me, the kind of attention that didn't end when the door closed. 3 days later, the company-wide meeting took place. Melissa walked on stage in a bright yellow dress, light bouncing off her like a spotlight. She opened with a talk about Novasphere's new energy, then displayed a slideshow of employees in colorful, creative outfits. The last slide showed a model employee in an orange dress. The next slide, my workspace, my desk, my white shirt, my gray slacks. The caption read, "We can be professional and creative, can't we?" The room laughed. A few people looked at me, then quickly looked away. I stayed still. No smile, no reaction. When it was over, Ethan walked over. "Don't take it personally," he said quietly. "She loves attention. You're not the first person she's targeted." I looked at him. "And you? Which side are you on?" He hesitated, pressing his lips together. "I just want things to go smoothly. Be careful, Elena. Melissa doesn't like silence." That night, when I got home, I turned on my personal computer and accessed the internal network through the back door I'd built years ago. I reviewed the latest access logs. Ethan's account appeared again, this time during the exact hour of the company meeting. I opened the access file. It was a report folder containing the periodic submissions to the Department of Commerce, the reports I was responsible for verifying, but the downloaded version didn't match. Sections of data had been copied, and the editor's name had been replaced with mine. I sat still, heartbeat steady but slow. There was no question anymore. This wasn't about dress code or culture. Someone was setting up a narrative, and I, despite my silence, had just been written in as the lead. I saved every piece of evidence to my external drive, locked it away in my drawer. In the reflection of the darkened screen, my face looked unfamiliar, calm, cold, and distant. That night, I understood the truth. The email had never been a new policy. It was a declaration of war. 3 days after the meeting, I received an internal notice. Urgent HR meeting. Room 4C. 15 minutes. Mandatory attendance. No subject line, no sender listed. Just a small note beneath it. At the request of HR Director, Melissa Crane. When I walked in, the room was nearly empty. Only 3 people, Melissa, Ethan, and a young administrative assistant I didn't recognize, probably there to take notes. Melissa sat at the head of the table, the light glinting off her silver earrings like a pair of quotation marks. Ethan sat to her right, eyes down, fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the table as if counting seconds. "Elena," Melissa began, soft but firm. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We have a few matters to clarify." I placed my folder on the table and waited. "Over the past week," she continued, "HR has received reports that you've been displaying an uncooperative attitude toward the company's cultural policies. Additionally, there are concerns about your lack of coordination with other departments, specifically the project division." I looked her straight in the eye. "Feedback from who?" "Can't disclose that," she said with a thin smile, "but I think you can guess." Ethan said nothing. He kept spinning a pen between his fingers, avoiding my gaze. Melissa slid a packet of papers toward me. "This is an internal review report. You can read it before signing." "Of course, if you have feedback, I'm open to hearing it." I flipped through the pages. The language was carefully crafted, a lack of team collaboration, resistant to new company initiatives, and difficulty integrating with the group culture. At the bottom was a recommendation: formal warning or termination if no improvement within 2 weeks. I finished reading and looked up. "You want me to sign this?" "It's just procedure," Melissa said, her tone softening. "If you cooperate, I'm sure we can resolve this easily. But if you continue reacting the way you have been, I'll have to escalate to the board." "Reacting?" I repeated. "You mean protecting federal data integrity?" The air tightened. Ethan finally spoke, voice quick, nervous. "Elena, no one's saying you did anything wrong. It's just your approach makes collaboration difficult." "I follow the FDAS protocol," I said evenly. "You know that better than anyone." He swallowed hard, looking away. Melissa smiled, a thin, deliberate cut of a smile. "Let's not drag technicalities into this. This is a cultural issue, not a legal one." "You're mistaken," I said, closing the folder. "When internal policy interferes with federal data, it becomes legal, and I don't recall any clause giving you the right to evaluate my work style." She leaned back, fingers interlaced, voice quiet but sharp. Elena, do you know who you're speaking to? I do, I said. And I also know my contractual authority. You can fire me, but you can't alter Department of Commerce validation logs. I'm the only one with level 3 encryption keys. Are you sure you want to test that? She froze for a second, then regained composure. Is that a threat? No. A reminder. Ethan jumped in, lowering his voice. Let's not blow this up. Elena, just sign it and we'll all move on. Nobody wants to lose their job over clothes. I looked at him, and in that moment, I realized everything had been arranged. Ethan wasn't there to mediate. He was there to witness. I set the pen down and signed my name slowly, deliberately. Then I said, I'm signing not because I agree, but to document that I was coerced. Melissa's smile thinned. Documentation is a form of cooperation, too. I stood, gathered my papers. Before leaving, I said without turning back, my contract requires that I transfer all federal data before departure. I'll comply. But if there's any unauthorized access during that process, I'll report it directly to FDIS. The door closed behind me with a soft click, the sound of a chapter ending. I returned to my desk, powered on my system, and logged in for the last time. I backed up all access logs, saved every trace of Ethan's unauthorized entries, and re-encrypted the system using my personal key. No one else knew that with every sync, an encrypted mirror of the federal dataset was being sent to a secondary government server, a route only I knew. When I shut down the machine, the clock read 5:12 p.m. The rain outside was heavier now, each drop striking the glass like a slow countdown to something breaking. I packed my things, taking only a small bag and my external drive. No one looked up as I passed, but I could feel the quiet glances behind glowing screens. At the elevator, I turned once more toward the blurred glass. Inside, Melissa was speaking to Ethan, her voice low and sharp as a blade. They thought they'd won. What they didn't know was that what they made me sign today would become the evidence against them. I left the building in silence. The wind had picked up, the smell of rain mixing with the tang of metal. I didn't feel angry or afraid, only clear, cold, calm, the kind that comes before a storm. That day, I lost my job, but in my bag, I carried something that would make them lose much more. I didn't go back to Novasphere the next day. There was no reason to. My contract was over, and I had no desire to return to a place where deceit was wrapped in polite congratulations. I spent the morning at home in my small 12th floor apartment, listening to Seattle rain fall steadily against the steel railing like an old familiar rhythm. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and checked the backup files. Everything was intact. The logs, Ethan's access traces, and the files where my name had been forged as the last editor. No errors, nothing out of place. By noon, my phone rang.
Настолько мне нравилось остров,
I
что каждый
hesitated a
день
moment,
ела в
then
мексиканском ресторане у своего дома, и мне
Elena
дали
Brooks?
скидку 50%.
Yes. This is the
50.
Novasphere Technical Division, said a man's tired voice. We're having a major security issue. Do you have a few minutes?
Это в Питере
I
было.
paused. I don't work for Novasphere anymore. We know, he said quietly, but you're the only one with level 3 clearance. All the federal analysis data tied to contract 4421F is locked. No one can get in. The system shows the fault coming from your account. I closed my eyes, exactly as I'd expected. When they terminated my contract without completing the security handover, the protection protocol had triggered automatically, a deep-level encryption layer designed to prevent unauthorized access. And only I knew how to release it. You should contact FDIS, I said evenly. If a federal contract like 4421F is compromised, they need to be notified within 24 hours. FDIS? He repeated, panicked. God, if we call them, the company's finished. I said nothing. The line went quiet, then disconnected. That afternoon, an alert flashed on my personal laptop. Even though my corporate account had been disabled, the monitoring system I'd set up still forwarded every unauthorized access attempt. On the screen, the message read, Alert, unauthorized attempt detected. Data Vault 03, Federal Contract 4421F access. User, Ethan Cole. I stared at it for a long time. 1 minute, 2, 3. I knew exactly what was happening inside that building. They were trying to force the system open, to restore access and bury the incident before anyone outside found out. But the system wasn't that naive. When a government database tied to contract 4421F is breached, the alert doesn't just reach me, it also goes straight to the Federal Data Integrity Service. In Washington, at the FDIS headquarters, a red code flashed across the monitors. Novasphere Analytics, Federal Contract 4421F. A federal alert was triggered. By late afternoon, the rumor spread through the company like wildfire. The federal data network was frozen. All project operations suspended, and the tech department was coordinating with an external agency. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew FDIS was involved. That evening, a message appeared on my phone from Rachel, the only colleague I still trusted, head of CIS, the technical team. Have you heard? She wrote. FDIS just sent inspectors. They're questioning Melissa and Ethan. Stay home. It's bad here. I replied, I know. They opened that door themselves. Rachel wrote back, Melissa told the CEO you caused the lockout. They're trying to pin it on you. I stopped typing, drew a slow breath. I'd anticipated this, but hearing it spoken out loud still sent a chill through me. I opened the backup files again, verified every log tied to contract 4421F, and uploaded everything to a private folder on the secondary federal server, sealed with my authentication key. In the corner of the screen, the sync icon glowed, a small blue circle turning slowly. When it was completed, I knew the truth was untouchable. The next morning, tech news outlets started reporting a major data security incident at a Seattle analytics firm. Novasphere wasn't named yet, but anyone in the field could guess. I sat in my usual cafe, watching the headlines scroll across the screen. A federal data contractor has suspended operations following an internal access failure linked to contract 4421F. The Federal Data Integrity Service has been notified. I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness lingering on my tongue. No satisfaction, no triumph, just the quiet inevitability of consequences. Across the city, I could picture Melissa pacing the conference room, Ethan beside her, sweat beating at his temple. They would claim I caused the shutdown, that I deliberately locked the system as revenge. But every word they spoke would be audited by FDIS. Every log, every timestamp, every line of code tied to contract 4421F. And I knew the system didn't lie. When night fell, my phone lit up again. Another unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Ms. Brooks? The voice was calm, male, steady. This is Agent Miller, Federal Data Integrity Service. We need to meet to verify a few details regarding federal contract 4421F. I looked out the window. Rain still fell, city lights shimmering across the wet pavement like ribbons of silver. I spoke softly, almost to myself. I figured you'd reach out eventually. Thank you for your cooperation, he said. We'll arrive in Seattle tomorrow morning. The call ended. I set the phone down and sat quietly in the dark. It had all begun with an email about dress code, and now it had become a federal investigation. I didn't smile. I only exhaled slowly. Somewhere deep in the city, the alarms had already gone off. And for Novasphere, the storm tied to contract 4421F had just begun. The next morning, Seattle didn't rain, but the sky still hung heavy like a sheet of gray steel. I woke early, made coffee, and turned on my computer. There were 3 new emails in my inbox. 2 ads and 1 with no sender, only a subject line. They're rewriting the story. I opened it. Inside was a private link to Novasphere's internal media page. The article appeared on screen, written in the careful, measured tone only PR teams could master. The recent federal data access issue resulted from a technical error by former employee Elena Brooks, who failed to follow the proper security handover protocol. Novasphere is cooperating with the Federal Data Integrity Service to resolve the matter and restore operations. I sat still, staring at the phrase technical error until the coffee went cold. That was their choice, to cover the truth in polished language, to make me the cause and themselves the victims. I wasn't angry, I just knew everything was unfolding exactly as I'd predicted. Around noon, Rachel texted me. Melissa just held an emergency meeting. They hired a private auditing firm, Ardent and Company, to prepare a transparency report for the media. Apparently, Ethan's drafting it. I wrote back, "Don't get involved. They're trying to fabricate evidence." Rachel replied, "I know, but Melissa messed up. She sent the first draft to the PR group and accidentally attached the original access file." I froze. "Original?" I asked. "Yeah," Rachel said. "The federal contract file. It's electronically signed under her name." I knew what that meant. Every time a file is signed with a federal digital ID, the Federal Data Integrity Service automatically creates a verification copy, complete with a timestamp and an IP address. Melissa had just sent direct evidence of her own violation into a government database. By afternoon, the Federal Data Integrity Service had set up a temporary office on Novasphere's 5th floor. 2 agents, Miller and Vega, arrived in dark suits, their faces unreadable. They instructed all employees to remain inside until the inspection concluded. Melissa tried to hold it together. She was on the phone nonstop, her voice climbing higher each minute. "No, I checked that file. It's just a copy. They can't charge me for an accidental send. No, I'll handle the media first." Ethan stayed in his office, but from the hallway cameras Rachel accessed, I saw him calling one number after another. Her messages came through in bursts. "Guess what? They're wiping the system logs. Let them," I replied. "The more they delete, the clearer the Federal Data Integrity Service will see." I sat in my apartment, following the internal updates. Around 3 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. Unknown number. Miller's calm voice. "Ms. Brooks, we're in the middle of a full review. Several files with your federal signature have appeared in the audit. We need your confirmation." "I know," I said. "Those files were altered. My original code is different. I have verified copies stored on the backup server." Silence on the line for a few seconds. Then Miller spoke again. "Thank you. If that's true, I suggest you stay where you are. We'll be in touch shortly." When the call ended, I reopened my encrypted folder. I knew this moment was coming. Melissa wasn't just fighting back. She was fighting blind, trying to save her reputation by fabricating another version of the truth. But in the world of data, every lie leaves a trace. That night, tech outlets began publishing the leaks. Novasphere denies allegations of intentional federal data tampering. HR director calls it an honest mistake by a former employee. I looked at the headline and gave a faint smile. They were playing a losing game. When Melissa sent that falsified report, the Federal Data Integrity Service system had automatically archived it, signature and all. And in the bottom corner of the file, her own electronic authentication mark remained. Federal Contract 4421F. Rachel called close to midnight. Her voice trembled. "Elena, the Federal Data Integrity Service found the file. They said the federal authentication code was misused. They've locked down the entire system. No one's allowed to leave." I stepped onto the balcony and the city blurred beneath the fog. "They did it to themselves," I said softly. "I didn't have to touch a thing." A long pause. Then Rachel exhaled. I've never seen her so scared. Melissa's still on the phone, but Ethan is silent. Completely. I know. That kind of silence isn't loyalty, it's fear. He understood. When she went down, he would too. By morning, Novasphere looked like a hive cracked open. Employees were told not to use email, not to carry personal devices out of the building. 2 Federal Data Integrity Service vehicles idled at the front gate, their blue lights reflecting on the glass. News outlets began naming the company. Among those listed under investigation, HR Director Melissa Crane, the same woman who once thought she could control everything with a few lines about office dress code. As for me, I didn't leave my apartment. I simply powered on my computer, logged into the backup network, and watched as a new message appeared on the screen. Case file 4421F has been verified. Evidence validated. Origin confirmed. Human Resources Department. Novasphere Analytics. I closed the laptop gently. The story they wrote to hide the truth had just become the evidence that would destroy them. They struck back, but that strike triggered the final lock, the one they would never be able to close again. 2 days later, Novasphere officially hit the national news. It was no longer leaks or anonymous sources. It was a verified headline, broadcast at 7 in the evening on the country's biggest financial network. The anchor read slowly, every word deliberate. The data technology company Novasphere Analytics is under federal investigation for violations of security regulations tied to its government contract. According to sources from the Federal Data Integrity Service, evidence shows that portions of classified data were accessed and modified without authorization from within the company's human resources department. The final line landed like the edge of a blade. The FDIS has confirmed that the source of the breach originated from the company's internal system, not from the former employee previously accused. I sat in my apartment as the blue light of the television reflected across the wall. At the bottom of the screen, a slow ticker scrolled by. Novasphere's spokesperson declined to comment. Moments later, my phone rang. Rachel, Elena, are you watching the news? Yeah, Melissa's been suspended. The Federal Data Integrity Service sealed off the entire HR department. Ethan's been called in for questioning. CEO Brian disappeared this morning. Rumor is he's already meeting lawyers. I said nothing, just listened to Rachel's uneven breathing. You won, Elena. I looked out at Seattle's misty skyline. No one wins, Rachel. The truth just finally gets seen. That night, I barely slept. Relief never came, only a wide, hollow quiet. I thought about the mornings in that office. The bitter coffee, the harsh fluorescent lights, the polite compliments used like scalpels. I didn't feel regret or satisfaction, just an understanding that some things, once broken, don't mend. The next morning, a black car stopped in front of my building. Agent Miller stepped out, along with his partner, Agent Vega. They weren't wearing suits this time, just black jackets with FDIS badges clipped to their belts. I opened the door before they could knock. Ms. Brooks, Miller said calmly, we need clarification on a few points before we close the investigation. I invited them in. The apartment was small and tidy, filled only with the scent of coffee and printer paper. Vega looked around, her sharp eyes curious but not judging. Miller opened a folder. We've confirmed that the data you provided matches the original copy stored on the federal server. Additionally, the system logs show you had no access attempts after your contract termination date. Could you explain why you kept a backup copy? I answered slowly but clearly. Under Federal Contract 14B, I'm authorized to retain a local backup for 72 hours to ensure data restoration in case of technical failure. I kept it out of habit. No edits, no interference. Miller nodded. We verified that. And for what it's worth, keeping that copy helped us restore parts of the data that Novasphere tried to erase. I stayed quiet. Vega gave a faint, almost rare smile, the kind you don't often see from investigators. Not many people are that thorough, Ms. Brooks. Honestly, without that backup, Novasphere might have wiped everything. Miller closed the folder. The investigation is nearly complete. But there's one more thing. The Department of Commerce would like to invite you to join the independent audit team for the replacement project. It's unrelated to Novasphere. They're looking for someone with your level of integrity and expertise. I looked at him, surprised. You mean, could I return to federal work? Not return, he corrected. Step up. They trust you. The room went still. Outside, pale sunlight broke through the clouds, falling across the gray carpet. I exhaled and nodded. Thank you. I'll think about it. Take your time, Miller said, standing. One last note. Novasphere's CEO officially resigned this morning. And both HR Director Melissa Crane and Deputy Project Director Ethan Cole are being charged for federal data violations. I closed my eyes briefly, then opened them again. I wasn't surprised, but it still ached somewhere deep inside. A small part of me had wished it could have ended quietly, but the real world doesn't favor quiet endings. When they left, I walked them to the door. Vega paused, her voice low. You know, sometimes justice doesn't come to punish. It comes to teach people the weight of the truth. You did the right thing. I gave a faint smile. I just did what made sense. The door closed behind them. I stood still, listening as their footsteps faded down the hall. That afternoon, the headlines broke. Novasphere HR director and associate charged for breach of federal contract valued at $50 million. The industry exploded. Commentators debated toxic corporate culture, HR overreach, and the dangers of internal manipulation. No one mentioned me. My name appeared briefly, former employee whistleblower, and then disappeared beneath the next cycle of news. That night, I stepped outside for the first time in days. No rain, no chill. I walked along Lake Union, watching the city lights ripple across the water. Everything was quiet, almost impossibly so. I didn't know what I was feeling. Maybe emptiness, maybe relief, maybe both. But for the first time in months, I felt free. And somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "They fired you over a dress code and they lost $50 million. Sometimes the real cost of arrogance isn't the money. It's the lesson they'll never forget." I smiled and kept walking. The city lights burned bright ahead, as if nothing had ever fallen. Only people learning, at last, to see themselves clearly. A week later, I received an official letter from the Department of Commerce. The subject line read clearly, "Invitation to collaborate, National Data Integrity Project." I read it 3 times before I could believe it was real. The letter thanked me for assisting in verifying data integrity and invited me to serve as an independent advisor in the new federal security program. The salary was more than double, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the last line. We need someone who understands that silence can sometimes be the strongest form of protection for the truth. I sat in my apartment, watching the morning light slide across the table. Everything that had happened, the emails, the words, the meetings layered with hidden intent, now felt like a distant dream. But I knew I had lived it. That afternoon, Rachel came by. She looked tired but lighter, the tension gone from her face. "I quit," she said, setting her coffee on the table. "After everything, there's nothing left to stay for. People are still working, but no one trusts each other anymore. It's like everyone's afraid of being betrayed." I asked, "What about Melissa and Ethan?" She sighed. "They've been charged. Ethan's cooperating with the Federal Data Integrity Service, so he might avoid prison. Melissa won't. She's still trying to claim she was following the CEO's orders, but they found the email she sent, the one where she signed off on accessing the federal data. She'll be facing trial." I stayed quiet. Rachel went on. "I heard Novasphere is being sold. The federal contract's been canceled. Their stock value dropped more than 60%. The board's falling apart." I nodded. No one survives after lying to a system built on truth. Rachel looked at me, her eyes a mix of awe and unease. "Elena, I still don't get it. Why don't you hate them? If it were me, I'd feel vindicated." I smiled faintly. Hate doesn't make data clean. I never wanted revenge. I just wanted everything back in its rightful place. Rachel pressed her lips together, then nodded. She understood. We sat in silence for a while, the wind moving softly through the window. That night, after she left, I turned on the TV. A short news segment ran about Novasphere's upcoming federal hearing. The footage showed Melissa walking briskly through the courthouse hallway, face stiff, dark glasses hiding her eyes, avoiding cameras. Ethan followed behind, head lowered, saying nothing. I didn't feel joy, but I felt calm. A few days later, Agent Vega called me. "Ms. Brooks," she said, her tone gentler than before. "I just wanted to let you know the Novasphere case is closing. The Federal Data Integrity Service considers you a key factor in resolving it. They wanted me to thank you," I answered. "I only did my job." Vega gave a soft laugh. "No, you did much more. You proved that in a world full of false rules, some people still follow the real ones. That's rare." She paused, then added, "If you ever feel alone, remember, justice is often silent, but it's never absent." When the call ended, I sat by the window for a long time, looking at the city stretched out below. I thought about people like Melissa, those who believe power lies in controlling others instead of mastering themselves. Maybe she forgot that in the world of data, everything leaves a trace, even deceit. A week later, I began my new assignment. No more glossy offices or double-edged meetings. This time, I worked directly with the Federal Security Division, inside a building with no name, no logo, only a code. On the first day, I walked down a long hallway, the walls metallic gray, silent enough that I could hear my own footsteps. The supervisor said, "You'll help us design the new access monitoring framework. We want to make sure what happened at Novasphere never happens again." I nodded. I understand. When I sat at my new desk, the screen lit up. The message read, "Welcome Brooks, security level black." In that instant, I knew I had crossed into another world, one where everything was recorded, verified, and nothing could stay hidden forever. That night, as I left the building, I paused on the steps. The wind carried the faint metallic scent of the city. I remembered the day Melissa called me into HR over a pair of gray pants. It had all started there. A small insult, a meaningless email. And like a domino chain, it had taken down an entire system. I smiled, thin, almost wistful. Sometimes justice doesn't need to shout. It just needs one person who pays attention, remembers every detail, and waits for the right moment. I walked on beneath the streetlights, with only one feeling left inside me, peace. That morning, Seattle was impossibly clear. After weeks of endless rain, sunlight spilled through the glass of the Federal Security Office where I worked, casting a soft glow across the desk like a quiet reminder that winter had finally stepped aside. I sat before the screen, typing the first lines of code for the new National Data Monitoring Project, one built from the ruins of Novasphere's mistakes. On the display was the National Access Map, its glowing lines pulsing like the veins of some immense living system. My task was simple but heavy. Write the authentication protocols that would ensure no one, not a senior executive or a head of human resources, could ever erase or alter a trace inside the system again. Each line of code I wrote felt like a promise to myself, never let history repeat. As I focused, my phone rang. "Rachel, did you see the news this morning?" Her voice carried both awe and disbelief. "Not yet. What happened?" Melissa confessed. "In court. She admitted everything, the forged evidence, forcing Ethan to help her." I went silent. Rachel lowered her voice. She said one thing before they took her away. "I thought I could control everything until I realized the only person I couldn't control was myself." I closed my eyes, listening to the soft hum of the air conditioner. A wave of sadness and relief passed through me. Maybe, finally, she understood. "I guess that means it's over," I said. "Yeah," Rachel answered. "The old company's been sold to a new conglomerate. They're dissolving human resources. Ethan's entered witness protection. And you?" She paused. "You're about to be famous, Elena." I let out a quiet laugh. "I don't want fame. I just want peace." We talked a bit more, then said goodbye. After the call ended, I sat still, looking through the window. Sunlight reflected off the building across the street, hundreds of windows gleaming like mirrors, a city reborn after the storm. At noon, I was called into a meeting with Agents Miller and Vega. The room was small, bright, and calm. No one smiled, but the air wasn't tense anymore. Miller began. "We'd like you to review the final report before we close the Novasphere case." He handed me the file. Inside, it read, "Source of violation, Novasphere Analytics, Human Resources Department. Financial damage, $50 million due to federal contract termination. Status, investigation concluded. Charges confirmed." At the bottom was a short note. "Thanks to the cooperation and integrity of former employee Elena Brooks, the case was resolved swiftly, preventing further loss." I read the line twice, not out of pride, out of disbelief. Through all of it, I had never once seen myself as a hero or a whistleblower. I was simply someone who refused to bow to deceit. Miller's voice was calm, steady. "The Department of Commerce wants to issue you an honorary commendation, but I'm guessing you'll decline." "You guessed right," I said, smiling faintly. "Any reason why?" "I don't need my name." Remembered, as long as they remember the lesson. Vega closed the folder, a small smile on her face. Fair enough. When the meeting ended, I stepped outside. The afternoon breeze was soft, and the faint sound of a ship's horn drifted in from the harbor. For the first time in months, the world felt quiet. No bitterness, no noise, just the simple realization that sometimes justice doesn't need to win. It only needs to be seen. That evening, I went home, brewed tea, and opened the old laptop, the one that once held the logs that brought Novasphere down. The folder Truth Backup was still there. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked Delete permanently. A prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to delete this file? I smiled. I'm sure. The screen dimmed, reflecting only my face. No longer the woman who'd been fired or accused or even vindicated. Just me, Elena Brooks, someone who had survived a storm and still found her calm. I stepped onto the balcony. The city glowed beneath me, alive and restless. Somewhere out there, people were still lying, rushing, trading trust for ambition. But I knew that if even one of them chose to stop, to look up, to say enough, the world would still have hope. I took a sip of tea, warmth spreading through my chest, and whispered to myself, they fired me over a dress code. And in the end, they lost something worth far more than $50 million. Trust. The night wind brushed my hair as I closed my eyes. In that quiet moment, I understood that my story was no longer a tragedy. It was a reminder. Never underestimate the quiet ones. Because sometimes silence is the loudest voice in a room full of lies. And so the story closed, not with an explosion, not with victory, but with the stillness of a soul that had finally found peace.